Today I am presenting a recap of a classic Western movie of 1969, 100 Riffles, starring the legendary actors Jim Brown, Raquel Welch, Burt Reynolds, and Fernando Lamas, and supported by others. The film was produced by Marvin Schwartz, directed by Tom Grise, and distributed by 20th Century Fox. The film's story is about a half-breed Yaqui Indian, Yaqui Joe, Burt Reynolds, who robs a bank in Arizona and spends the loot to buy 100 rifles for his people, the Yaqui Indians, who are savagely repressed and brutally executed by the Mexican government through a cruel general verdugo, Fernando Lamas. And an American police officer, Lydecker, Jim Brown, in pursuit of a bank robber, rides into Mexico and finds himself in great trouble. The film opens with a scene in which an Indian woman, Sarita, Raquel Welch, with a broken heart, watches his poor father being hanged by General Verdugo's soldiers. And after that she is immediately escorted to a nearest town, after being arrested by a group of soldiers, as Sarita started mourning on her father's dead body. In the meantime, an American police officer, Lydecker, rides into the town in pursuit of a bank robber, Yaqui Joe, who has stolen $6,000 from an Arizona bank. Upon his entry, he sees Indian people hanging from telephone poles along the railroad. In the town, he asks Lieutenant Franz von Klemm about Yaqui Joe, with a bounty of $200 on his head. The lieutenant replies he has seen him in a nearby hotel recently. In the meantime, General Verdugo, along with a railroad representative, Stephen Grimes, drives to the town, and few arrested Indians from the rebellion tribe are presented to him. He tells Stephen Grimes that these Indian claims that the Mexican land belongs to them, and moreover, they are fighting us for the last 400 years. Then General Verdugo executes the 3 Indians by using 1 bullet and brutally justifies his action by saying that bullets are more valuable than these Indians. Next, as a result of a brawl between Yaqui Joe and his girlfriend and with the resultant disturbance, some of the Indian prisoners along with Sarita try to escape while the Indian prisoners are shot, but Sarita is succeeded. Joe is arrested and presented to the furious general for all that disturbance, and he puts his gun on his face. Exactly at this time Lydecker comes forward and stops the general to do so. Then Lydecker tells the general that he is a deputy sheriff, and this man is wanted by law for robbing Citizens Bank in Phoenix, Arizona, and stealing $6,000 12 days ago. In the next scene, Joe is taken for interrogation, where the general, in a very pleasant mood, inquires about the stolen money. But Joe humorously replies that half of the money he spent on fun and rest of the amount he wasted. In the meantime, the general with Lieutenant Klemm leaves Joe and Lydecker alone with the guards at the entrance, in order to search the hotel room for the money, where he spent last night. After the general leaves, Lydecker asks Joe about the stolen money, and he replies that he spent that money to buy 100 rifles to strengthen his people, who are fighting against the cruel General Verdugo and his army. Lydecker suggests that they have to get out of there or their lives would be at risk, to which Joe agrees, and then suddenly he jumps out through the window, smashing the glass and falling on the ground. And then in a beautifully filmed scene, in which Joe, amid the firing, is riding the horse fast and passing through a bunch of soldiers, scattering them, and finally is succeeded to get away. On the other hand, Lydecker jumps over a horse, knocks down the rider, and amidst chaotic gunfire from all sides, accelerates the horse, and executes an audacious leap over Verdugo's jeep, soaring through the air. In the following scene, a chase ensues with Lydecker and Joe racing through a valley, and General Verdugo and his troops are following them. Sarita, who also joined the Indian rebellion group after watching her father hang by the Mexican army in the first scene of the movie, hides behind a rock and starts calling out to Joe when she spots him, speeding in her direction. And as Joe passes by her, she jumps and sits behind him. And the two make a stop at a concealed hideout in the hills, where after looking around for security purposes, they enter, while leaving General Verdugo and his soldiers far behind. In the meantime, Lydecker, following Joe, enters the same hideout and immediately knocks him down, leaving Joe surprised on the ground. Lydecker then informs him that he is escorting him to Phoenix to face the consequences for the crime of robbing the bank, where he made off with $6,000. Joe refuses to obey his orders and says, previously he wasn't worth a damn, but now he got a mission to accomplish, and that's to free his people from the worst oppression of the Mexican army. In the meantime, Sarita with an Indian freedom fighter returns and she asks Lydecker if would he help them in that mission. But he refuses and tries to drag Joe, and Sarita uses hand gestures to signal Indian freedom fighter to stop him, but he is knocked down by Lydecker. After seeing all that, Sarita rushes to grab a gun, and exactly at that time, General Verdugo along with his soldiers enters the hideout and takes all of them in his custody. But soon, the Indian freedom fighter managed to escape from their custody, and Sarita also gets away after stabbing a soldier with great courage. After that, Lydecker and Joe are tied together with a single handcuff, secured across the horse saddle while their feet touching the ground, as the horse begins to gallop, dragging both of them in a pretty bad shape. In the next scene, they arrive at an army post where both Lydecker and Joe are tied to a massive severed tree trunk. Here General Verdugo announces that he has seized all 100 rifles, which Joe had acquired with the stolen money. After that, railroad representative, Mr. Stephen Grimes, who is American, comes to them and after introducing himself, helps them drink some water. Then he advises them to tell General Verdugo what he wants or otherwise, they may lose their lives. Joe totally rejects that advice, while Lydecker asks Grimes to tell the general that they want to see him. In the next scene, both of them are presented to General Verdugo and Lieutenant Clem, where Lieutenant asks Joe, where is he hiding the Riffles other than the 100 ones? But Joe, supported by Lydecker, clearly denies that he is in possession of more rifles. Upon their refusal, General Verdugo suddenly issues a command for Lydecker and Joe to be executed by the firing squad. In the following scene, Lydecker and Joe are pushed toward the firing squad, and as the firing squad takes the position, all of a sudden, a bunch of Indian rebels led by Sarita emerge behind the boundary wall and ambush the post. They quickly eliminate the firing squad and the post becomes a battleground. There is crossfire between the rebels and General Verdugo's army, leaving most of the soldiers dead and Verdugo wounded. Taking advantage of the situation, Lydecker and Joe, while still bound by a single handcuff, managed to escape along with Sarita and Yaqui Indians, while taking possession of the 100 Riffles as well. In the next scene, Lydecker, Joe, and Sarita sit atop a hill, while Lydecker and Joe are still bound together, and Sarita seems to wrap a wet piece of cloth around Joe's wrist. Lydecker asks Joe what he's going to do with the 100 Riffles which he bought with the stolen money and now are in his possession again. Joe replies he wants to hand over them to Romero, the Yaqui Indian general. Lydecker mocks Romero, which Sarita did not like at all. But Lydecker replies he is instead taking him to Phoenix for trial, and he further adds angrily that as he has got nothing to do with their Revolutionary War, as that is not his war or business. He further says that he spent 15 years in the cavalry, keeping the law and chasing bad Indians. Lydecker further adds that actually he does not like Indians. After hearing that insulting remarks about Indians, Sarita immediately becomes furious and says we should have killed him. Joe agrees to her and suddenly attacks him and starts strangulating him. After that, a fierce fight between them ensues which leads to a tense situation. When inadvertently Joe loses his footing and falls over the edge of the cliff and then finds himself hanging in the air. That makes Joe very frightened and desperately he starts requesting Lydecker to pull him up, which he accepts and safely pulled him up. But as Joe's feet touch the ground, he again attacks him, and as retaliation, Lydecker starts strangulating his neck. As Sarita sees all this, she without a moment's hesitation, steps into the fray, raises her gun and points it toward Lydecker to rescue Joe. Exactly at this moment, the Indian freedom fighter spots General Verdugo's soldiers, riding fast through the valley toward them, making a cloud of dust behind. After that, a thrilling chase ensues through a winding valley in which Lydecker, Joe and Sarita are seen galloping swiftly, putting as much distance as they can between themselves and Mexican troops. In a beautifully filmed scene, the trio of Lydecker, Joe, and Sarita are depicted riding down a treacherous and uneven downhill path. The path is rugged, with every step presenting the risk of slipping and losing balance, making a cloud of dust around. General Verdugo, along with soldiers constantly after them, and traverses the same difficult and risky passage while following them and showing a great determination in this regard. After an arduous and very tiring journey, they finally arrive at a small village, where Yaqui Indians gather around Lydecker and greet him. Soon Joe is seen riding fast toward Lydecker and informs him and Sarita that General Verdugo is just 1 kilometer away. They all immediately pack up and leave. Soon after they leave, General Verdugo launches an ruthless assault on the village, while Chief of the village can be seen, requesting to spare his life, but he is executed. And the troops open fire, claiming the lives of innocent men and putting everything on fire, while taking women and children as hostages. Lydecker, Joe, and Sarita are still not far away from the village, when they see a thick plume of black smoke rising from the village. General Verdugo's ruthless attack was continued until the whole village was burnt to ashes. After that, General orders to leave the village. Lydecker and others then quickly return to the village and find the whole village was left in ruins, with dead bodies scattered here and there. Sarita gets shocked when she finds that they have taken away all the children, then she firmly declares that she wants them back, to which Lydecker agrees. So as sunsets and dark intensifies, they along with a group of brave Yaqui Indians stealthily approach the army post, where they think Verdugo has kept the captives. After that they launch a surprise ambush, swiftly empowering and eliminating all the soldiers on duty. In the meantime, the railroad representative Mr. Grimes, while hiding in a room, suddenly opens fire at Sarita, but instead, Lydecker is wounded, but he soon captures him. After the victory, a sense of jubilation seems to sweep over the victorious Indians in the form of jubilant dancing, laughter, and joyous yells. Under the state of jubilation, the Yaqui Indians start setting the post ablaze. The fire erupted with fierce intensity, and the ceiling-touching flames rapidly spread to every corner of the post, destroying the post completely. The next morning, when General Verdugo along with the lieutenant and soldiers return to the post, they find the once formidable army post, now reduced to ashes and charred remains, which shock them terribly. In the next scene, General Verdugo and Lieutenant Clem are seen aboard a train, and the two are discussing Lydecker. General Verdugo says he wants Lydecker at any cost, as he was responsible for all destruction at the post. As Lieutenant disagrees, that makes General furious. In the next scene, Lydecker asks the railroad representative, Stephen Grimes, who is still in their custody, for what purpose General Verdugo is using the train. Grimes replies the train is carrying troops and supplies, and Sarita further adds that the train will make the only stop at a water tower along the route. So, they plan to ambush the train at that point, as it was very hard for them to attack a train that was moving fast with General Verdugo's army on board. In the following scene, as the train halts at the water tower for water filling, Lydecker, Joe, and Sarita along with Indian rebels who are already lying in wait underground, launch an ambush. A cross-firing ensues, swiftly and deadly. They empower General Verdugo's soldiers and gain control of the train by eliminating all the soldiers. Amidst the chaos, Mr. Grimes seizes the opportunity to escape from Indian rebels' custody and manages to meet General Verdugo, telling him that they have taken the train and now have a plan to attack this town, and he is seen making fun of it. In the following scene, the train, now in possession of the Indian rebels, is seen moving fast toward the town, where General Verdugo's army is stationed. On the other hand, General Verdugo and Lieutenant Clem oversee the soldiers, strengthening their defense by stacking sandbags one on the top of other along the railroad for an impending attack. Then General Verdugo is seen, anxiously waiting for the train, and when it slowly comes into view, the general issues the order to fire. Simultaneously, several Riffles with rapid bursts of machine guns open fire on the train, which in turn derails from its tracks and hit nearby structures. After that, a fierce fight between the Yaqui Indians and General Verdugo ensues, where Mexican army can be seen using machine guns versus Riffles being used by Indians. And the town transforms into a battlefield, when Verdugo launches a ferocious assault, employing cannons to a devastating effect. Where Lydecker, Joe, and Sarita can be seen fighting bravely and causing great damage to the enemy side. In the next scene, Lydecker suddenly catches sight of General Verdugo, who is looking around and then rides fast in one direction. Lydecker fires at his horse's feet, causing the horse to tumble and throwing General Verdugo off its back and onto the ground, and a group of angry Indians can be seen, moving toward him. And in no time a bunch of Indians surround him and stab him multiple times in his back, seeking vengeance for the atrocities he had committed against their people. With the death of General Verdugo, the war is over, and Joe is telling Lydecker that they won. In the meantime, the Indian freedom fighter along with other Indians, carrying the dead body of Sarita, is seen coming in their direction, and Lydecker looks at her with a broken heart. In the following scene, Mr. Stephen Grimes comes to Joe and encourages him to be the next leader of his people, to which he does not agree. But he tries to convince Joe that if he does not do that, then another Mexican general will come to savagely oppress his people again. After that, Joe comes to Lydecker, where he sees him preparing his horse for going back. Joe is surprised, and tries to stop him by telling him that he is not going with him. Lydecker replies that he does not want to take him, as his people need him. Joe asks Lydecker that for what purpose he is going back, as without taking him he would lose all his job privileges. Lydecker agrees to what Joe said, but he replies that he is going back because he wants to give it one more shot. After that he starts moving, but soon he stops and turns toward Joe and says, "Good luck, amigo." Lydecker starts heading toward the north. In the last scene of the movie, Joe is seen behaving like a leader by gathering his people for fixing the derailed train, as suggested by Mr. Grimes and Lydecker. And last but not least, I will ask you to subscribe to this channel to watch more such classic Western movie recaps. Thanks.